Welcome back, Sebastian here. Time for my review of qualifying for the 2024 Chinese Grand Prix. So of course, not in my usual room, no whiteboard today for qualifying, but still thought I would do a proper review. So starting with Q1, Sargent went wide on a hot lap. Tsunoda complains on the radio saying his DRS isn't working, which around a track like this with that super long back straight is certainly not ideal. Perez was then impeded by Albon. I wrote probably a penalty, but it turns out that was basically there would be no further action for that move. After the first hot laps, the 5 drivers in the drop zone were Gasly, Sainz, Ocon, Tsunoda, and Perez. Perez, of course, being impeded by Albon, abandoning that lap, so he had not set a representative lap time at that point. Track evolution still seemed to be really strong, as the driver who was leading the qualifying session Q1, of course, was constantly changing. And I think it went through like 5 or 6 different drivers over the course of that session. Hamilton in the drop zone, starting his final run, so definitely a driver who was under pressure to improve and make sure he was able to advance to Q2. Sargent then goes off on his own lap, spins somewhere in sector 2, so that's not great. That's kind of ruined his qualifying. And a big shock from Q1, Hamilton qualified P18, made a mistake at turn 14, went a bit too deep, understeered. The car kind of understeered, didn't really turn properly. So not ideal there. He came out afterwards admitting that it was his mistake. So yeah, a bit of a rough qualifying session, especially after a pretty good result in the sprint earlier today. The other drivers knocked out in Q1 were Zhou, of course, a bit unfortunate at his home race, Magnussen, Tsunoda, and Sargent. Tsunoda coming over the radio saying that there was something wrong with the car, saying that there was no way he could be qualifying 19th on pace. Perez qualified 15th, very, very close to being knocked out in Q1, but was able to advance to Q2. When we got to Q2, end of the first runs, Sainz kind of has a bit of a crash, a bit of a moment there, spins on the home straight, causing a red flag. And he basically went a bit too wide on that final corner, turn 16, kicked up a bit of gravel, went a bit on the exit curb, and just kind of lost the way of the car and spun. Lost his front wing, kind of making contact with the advertising on the side of the track, as well as a light touch with the wall, but he was able to continue, so the red flag was pretty short. But before Sainz crashed, some drivers were able to set a lap time. Verstappen was half a second faster than Norris, P2, so definitely ominous pace from the Red Bull in the dry conditions. Russell also was another driver who abandoned their lap midway through and didn't set a lap time in those first runs. So along with Sainz and Russell, who were in the drop zone, we had Albon, Ocon, and Gasly. But when it was all said and done in the final runs, which were pretty clean, the 5 drivers knocked out were Stroll, Ricciardo, Ocon, Albon, and Gasly. Stroll very, very close to making the Q3. I think with how things went in that final qualifying session, I do think he would be a bit disappointed to miss out on that session. Into Q3 we go. Russell and Hülkenberg, I believe, go out on used tires. Their times were pretty unrepresentative, so not really much to comment on further. Verstappen, first lap, sets the benchmark, a 1:33.977 to go fastest by, I believe, it was about 2 to 3 tenths of a second at that point, so pretty solid benchmark from Verstappen. Piastri also goes through the gravel at turn 16 on the end of his flying run, so maybe that cost him half a tenth or so, but he ends up, I believe, P5 or P6 behind Norris after those first runs. But when we get to the final runs, Ferraris make a big improvement off their first run, go 2-3, but they were pipped by the McLarens of Norris and Piastri. Verstappen sets a new benchmark, lowering his benchmark by his previous time by about 3 tenths of a second with a 1:33.6 flat. And then Perez, last driver to set a fast lap, so it gets a really nice lap in to go second, 3.2 tenths behind Verstappen. So really good effort from Perez to get P2 after almost getting knocked out in Q1. So your final grid for the Grand Prix tomorrow. Verstappen on pole with Perez second, so Red Bull 1-2. The car's been very, very good in qualifying this year, arguably much stronger in qualifying compared to last year. Alonso P3, really good job from him. And then we have the McLarens 4th and 5th, Norris ahead of Piastri. Third row, not third row of the grid, but 6th and 7th, we have Leclerc and Sainz, and then 8th is Russell, and then rounding out the 5th row of the grid, we have Hülkenberg and Bottas. 11th, we have Stroll, 12th, Ricciardo, 13th, Ocon, 14th, Albon, 15th, Gasly, 16th, Show, 17th, Magnussen, 18th, Hamilton, 19th, Tsunoda, and 20th, Sargent. So quite a bit of a different grid compared to yesterday. Verstappen on pole, Hamilton starting miles down. So it'll be interesting to see how well he can recover from that position. I think the race pace should probably be a bit better for the Mercedes. So I would expect Hamilton should be able to get back into the points. I would say top 8, 7th, 8th, I think would be a reasonable recovery from Hamilton. I think based on the results of qualifying, Verstappen should win the Grand Prix, especially given how strong his race pace was in those 19 laps of the sprint. Alonso, I don't think is going to be able to hold on to the podium we saw in the sprint. The tire management is just not there, even though we know Alonso is very good at it. We know that the Aston does tend to eat its tires a bit more compared to last year. So for the final spot on the podium, assuming Norris survives turn 1 this time, I would expect he has a good shot of getting on that podium. But I think the Ferraris will also be in that fight as well. So I think it's really going to be between the 2 McLarens and the 2 Ferraris for that final spot on the podium. And now that Perez is starting on the front row, I think pretty reasonable to expect that he'll slot second behind Verstappen as well. So there you go. There's my review for qualifying for the 2024 Chinese Grand Prix. I don't know, not an unexpected grid, not like we had for the sprint, but still looking forward to the race tomorrow. The review for tomorrow will be back at home with the whiteboard and everything, but I do think it will probably be a bit delayed, doing a race in the morning, which is why I'm staying in a hotel here. But nonetheless, pretty excited for the Grand Prix tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.